Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host, Dusty O'Connell, host with the Moster, as per usual. And joining me for the 190th episode of Norse Code, give or take a few, is Vikings blogger extraordinaire and useful human, Arif Hassan. How you doing, Arif?
That makes it like probably the 200th episode then, right? 190th numbered episode.
Yeah,
probably the 200th time we've recorded and put out an episode.
Yeah, we're around there somewhere. And then, there's the ones that we recorded that, either were eaten by a computer or just, never made it to air. So I'd say at some point recently we crossed the 200 mark.
Hooray!
Yay! It's impressive, right? That people are willing to listen this long. After years and years, the Vikings haven't gotten much better, but we have.
I like to think so. I think it is an indication that, because I think that if people weren't listening, we would have stopped this project a while ago, which is why most podcasts stop well before episode 100, usually before episode 50, I think. So, yeah, I'm pretty proud of us, and then happy that all of you have chosen to listen.
Well, and to my great consternation, every year more people listen. And every year more people give us more money. So every year I feel more and more obligated to continue doing the show. So we're...
I'm sorry, it's such a drag, man.
I know, gosh, we're stuck doing this awesome, fun thing for the long haul. No. Well, as we alluded to, Norse Code would not happen without the support of our amazing listener community that continues to grow year after year as we cover the long-suffering Minnesota Vikings. And if you would like to display a little financial support to the show, then you can do so by either becoming a Patreon subscriber, patreon.com/NorseCode, or throw in a few bucks in our tip jar at paypal.me/NorseCode. If you contribute $5 or more in either fashion, like either a $5 a month contribution on Patreon, or just give us $5 on PayPal, we will send you a sticker. We've got these sweet Norse Code logo stickers that just say, Norse Code, NorseCodePodcast.com, and then have the helmet in the background. They basically just look identical to the episode covers, but they're in giant weather-resistant bumper sticker form. So if you want to show off your Norse Code pride, snag one of those. And even if you don't, it would be really sweet if you threw us a few bucks because, we were actually just talking before the show about potential equipment upgrades for Arif, and about how he's gonna take the next step and join the world of I guess like real podcast / radio media guys. Like, you won't just be using a USB microphone plugged into a laptop. We'll get you hooked up with a real condenser mic and a mixer and all the things that you would need to take your show on the road, should you desire. Not that you ever would. I'm excited for you. I always get excited for new gear, whether it's mine or not.
Yeah, it's very, it's like when anybody gets new gear and they talk about it, it's like we've all opened a Christmas gift.
Well, yeah, and I mean, unboxing videos are super popular on YouTube. And like have you heard about haul videos? Like people that go shopping and they just
oh, this is my haul. Yeah.
Yeah, they bring home all their clothes and they try everything on for the webcam.
Yeah, I know, I've heard about them.
Yeah, I've never watched one, but I can see the appeal. Actually,
sure.
Maybe you can do one for your microphone. I'd watch that one.
Upload it to my YouTube channel. Yeah. Hey, so I haven't posted a video in 3 years, but this is my haul.
And it'll be mute because you'll be holding the microphone and it's not plugged in yet.
Exactly.
That'd be great. Anyway. Patreon.com/NorseCode if you want to become a monthly sponsor to the show, or if you just want to flip us a couple of bucks that you feel like we deserve, because we feel like we deserve it. Obviously, we work hard for you. So PayPal.me/NorseCode. You're still selling the Vikings guide, right? Zone coverage seems like intent on hiding it further and further afield from the main page. But that's not, anyone's. That's like an algorithm's fault, right? That's not like an editorial decision.
Yeah, they haven't made a decision we don't really want to make any more money on this, so just move it further. No, you're right. It's an algorithm.
At any rate, zonecoverage.com/football-guide-2017 will take you there to purchase the only Vikings guide you will need until next year when you need the next one. If that is too complicated for you, then we have a link in our menu on the NorseCodePodcast.com website. Just click on the little hamburger menu, whether you're on mobile or desktop, and you can be taken straight to the Zone Coverage landing page where you can purchase the 2017 Arif official Vikings. Well, not official. It's official to you, but not the Vikings.
Yeah, so it would be the official Arif unofficial Minnesota Vikings guide to 2017.
Officially. It's still the only one you need, and that's all that matters. So we've got a couple items of player news this week before we talk about the Seattle game, and then I guess we can talk a little bit about the 49ers game. We can point and laugh at that garbage fire for a few minutes before diving into the mailbag. We had a lot of questions this week. I think I did a pretty good job of curating them, so.
Yeah, it should be fun.
I'm looking forward to it. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have over a dozen contributors to the mailbag, which is a lot compared. Well, I mean, I guess that's kind of the signal to me that the season is ramping up, is that people, like a broader swath of people, start submitting mailbag questions, and then, the same couple of people start submitting like 20 or 30.
Yeah, 30, I think, happened this week. Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah, thanks, bud. Most, I guess, puzzling item of player news to me was the Vikings signing former Golden Gopher quarterback Mitch Leidner.
Yeah, I'm not really confident that was a solid decision. It's not going to impact the team too much. He's never going to play a game for the Vikings, in my estimation. And if he does, things have already gotten south, so who cares? But most of it is because, Taylor Heineke was injured when he was diving for that first down in the preseason game against the Seahawks, and they needed someone who had the capability to throw. Heineke should be healthy for the San Francisco game, but if he's not, they're not going to expose the starter or the primary backup to too much injury, and they'll play Mitch Leidner. It's not as if Leidner is meant to seriously push Heineke for that third quarterback spot, although, of course, if he plays well enough and shows enough, he could. But for now, they're basically evaluating whether or not they want to put him on a practice squad. I can start by talking about his positives, which do exist, although Gophers fans, I think, will justifiably deny that. He's got size and athleticism. Everyone's fairly aware of that. He's a pretty decent running quarterback with the ability to push a pile. But, beyond that, he has, a really good quick release. He can throw off of multiple platforms. He has decent accuracy at times, which I know is kind of damning with faint praise. But when he's on, he does look fairly accurate at all three levels of the field, in compressed pockets or at awkward arm slots. And even though he has large streaks of inaccuracy, it's one of the reasons he had a completion rate below 60% in college, I think that generally speaking, he could probably work with the accuracy he's shown. His biggest issue, of course, was his decision-making, which I would argue is a primary skill for a quarterback. And in that context, I'm not sure that that's fixable, but the Vikings will see if it is. And if it's not, then they'll move on. They'll find another developmental quarterback that they may like and put on the practice squad. My vote might be for Zach Terrell, former PJ Fleck, Western Michigan quarterback. I like him a lot. But, there's a bunch of other young quarterbacks out there that would be interesting to sign. But, yeah, it's not too impactful. It just kind of doesn't make sense.
Mitch Leidner, do not hang up your Bite Squad uniform just yet. You may soon be delivering food and not airmail to actual Vikings players very soon.
Hooray! I guess he delivered it to Andrew Sendejo, which, sure.
And then Sendejo shows up to work and he's there and it's like, oh, all right. That's a curious career progression. Is there a Bite Squad combine?
They did draft out that when one of your squad members gets signed by the Vikings, you start your own draft, now hiring 100-plus drivers. So I assume with the mountain of applications they're getting now as a result of Mitch Leidner's promotion to football, that they're going to have to start implementing a combine.
In other news, Tom Pelissero writes on NFL.com that Zimmer seems to think that, my words, not his, that Bradford is improving. I mean, I'm not sure if he watched the same Seattle game that we did last Friday, but yeah, Zimmer appears comfortable with Bradford's progress, saying that he's settling into the offense and that he and Pat Shurmur are working more effectively together. And then I don't really know what he said, but apparently they're of similar minds now, and they're starting to gel, having had an entire season to, I guess, figure stuff out together.
Yeah, and it's nice that Zimmer is happy with what he's seeing. He obviously has access to a lot more information than I do, as well as access to, kind of what he wants to see in a quarterback. But, I would politely disagree with him. I think that, Seattle showing wasn't the best. Zimmer might have just meant that he was happy that Bradford was taking more chances downfield and not as concerned about, whether or not those chances worked in those specific instances, because over the long run, Bradford has shown that he can fit the ball into tight windows, that he can complete deep passes, and so on. So the fact that he's taking chances may be what he's talking about, and that's true. I do want to see a more aggressive offense from the Vikings. I do know that a more aggressive offense means that you're just going to leave some plays out on the field, and you're going to miss more often. But I do think that, Bradford's decision-making wasn't that great in the Seattle game. And I think that in the instances where he threw against one-on-one coverage, once to Stephon Diggs, once to Michael Floyd, that he had open options that were probably better, not just more likely to hit, but also just as likely to get the yards you needed. He almost threw that interception to Richard Sherman. And, when he threw one of the passes to Stephon Diggs, I thought, not the interception, but another pass to Stephon Diggs that ended up converting a first down. I thought that was a poor decision because it exposed the receiver to a lot of harm. It was a hospital ball, right? And Adam Thielen was on the outside. Diggs was in the slot there. Adam Thielen was on the outside and was open. He was also running a slant. And that would have not only converted a first down, but have probably generated some pretty significant yards after catch. So there's some decisions in there that I don't think were very good. And Bradford should have ended up with an interception on the box score, and so on. So, I think he played that well, but, if Zimmer's only looking for certain or particular traits, and that's what he found, and that's why he's happy because he's not concerned about those other traits, I can kind of see why he's saying that.
But still, there were a couple of 3rd and 15s that we found ourselves on, and I was like, great, here comes a 6-yard pass. Sure enough, Sam Bradford did not disappoint. Well, I mean, he disappointed the Vikings, but he didn't disappoint me.
Right, he didn't disappoint your expectation. The thing that got me, I think, was a 3rd and 9. So it's definitely, teams attempt to convert 3rd and 9 essentially every time they're on 3rd and 9. It's not like a 3rd and 20 where you're just trying to get better field position for a punt. And Bradford looks downfield, doesn't see anything he likes, turns to Dalvin Cook, who is 1 yard past the line of scrimmage, and he's open, because obviously, and he overthrows Dalvin Cook. Some people say it's a throwaway. I'm not so sure it was, because there was not like a defender near Cook, and no one was really disrupting the passing lane. So that was weird. And I guess he avoided another, 1 yard pass in 3rd and 9, but I'm not so sure that that's maybe the best way to avoid it. So yeah, it's the same old Sam.
Even the throwaway stunk. Even if that was his intent, it still wasn't good.
Exactly.
Story in the Daily Norseman talking about potential shuffle of the offensive line. We didn't really talk a whole lot about Alex Boone. I mean, we talked about the potential contributions of rookies in different personnel packages along the offensive line. The article on Daily Norseman is specifically about, what happens if Aaron Boone gets squeezed out. What if he ends up not starting and it's what if it's Elflein and Reef and The other rookie, come on. Why can't I think of his name?
Well, there's Danny Isadora, but there's also Nick Easton, who's not.
Oh, yeah, Nick Easton. Non-rookie Nick Easton. Well, yeah, so the article posits a potential Elflein Easton Reef line with potentially no Alex Boone, and the reasoning behind it is partially just stuff that he observed at Mankato, but stuff that he's heard from teammates that Alex Boone might be like annoying.
I mean, who cares? No, I mean, like, who cares if he's annoying, right? Like, if he plays well, he's earned the right to be annoying. It's not like Richie Incognito is struggling to look for a job. He's probably one of the most annoying teammates you could have. He's literally a bully. So, whatever. I think that he's played really well in training camp. He looked all right in the one game that he played in. And I wouldn't say that Nick Easton playing really well displaces Alex Boone. I think fans just are more likely to see him as annoying than players are to see him as so annoying that I'd rather not him be on the offensive line. He's clearly an asset on the offensive line. So it is possible, and we saw Joe Berger talk about it a little bit, that Easton displaces Berger at the right guard spot. Berger played pretty well in this last preseason game, but in the Buffalo game and in training camp, I felt that he had struggled, and it could be, the case that Easton ends up replacing him based off of his play after he had replaced Alex Boone in the Seahawks game. And that's something that you could potentially look at. The idea that the Vikings running game played really well in the one game they didn't have Alex Boone in, as an argument that Alex Boone shouldn't be in there or that the starting interior should not include Alex Boone, I think is short-sighted and misguided. The fact that Berger put together a good game after, a couple of weeks of struggling, I don't think is an indication that we should, for example, keep Berger out there. Easton, he's had his struggles at center last year. He's played decently well at center this year. I think that he's played center better than Pat Elflein has in the preseason. But if he's playing well at guard, I can understand why you give him a shot at guard, but I wouldn't displace someone like Alex Boone, who not only had a really strong training camp, but as a long history of success at the guard spot. So I don't think it's likely, and it doesn't bother me that he's annoying.
Well, and let's be realistic. They're all going to get plenty of opportunities to play this season. If last season was any indication, I don't think we should be trimming down that portion of the roster unduly.
Yeah, right. Always look forward to surprise offensive line changes.
Moving on. Played a football game in Seattle on a Friday night. Which, all right, that's fine. The highlight, I think, on social media was Blair Walsh probably enduring some incisive taunting before the game started, and giving as good as he got, and then in classic Blair Walsh fashion, missing a field goal. Whoops.
I mean, he did well in the game. The taunting, you probably saw my reaction on Twitter. I was very whatever about it. Like, who cares? It's a kicker taunting someone in the second week of the preseason. And so it just didn't bother me at all. It bothered a lot of other people. They're like, the Vikings gave you such a chance. How could you do that? And it's just like, he played well against his former employer. Why wouldn't you revel in that a little bit? It didn't seem mean-spirited to me. And then the story came out that it really wasn't, and that a lot of it had to do with Vikings players taunting him and like you said, him giving as good as he got. And he wasn't pointing to like Mike Zimmer or Mike Prefer. He was pointing to some of the players that had been taunting him. So yeah, sure, he did the thing, and some people on Twitter got mad.
Well, and it's not like he did the line across the throat thing. He was just pointing him out like, hey, I see you, but he apparently saw them better than he could see the uprights in classic
Heyo.
Blair Walsh fashion. So,
Yeah.
He revealed his true nature, which I think took a lot of the steam out of whatever taunts he may have laid at the feet of his former team.
Oh, well.
Womp womp.
Womp womp.
So as far as the game goes, I feel like the best way to kind of encapsulate the whole experience is to, I guess, maybe highlight the flashes of decency and maybe the one or two like exciting moments of excellence that we saw. And then maybe just try not to think too much about how the rest of the game was just like mistakes and issues caused by the usual flaws.
That's very Vikings, I think. Oh yeah, no, there's this great, did really well in some individual areas. The 2012 Vikings made the playoffs. Everything's good.
Well, okay. Okay, so for example, it seemed like our defensive backs were all up in the business of the Seattle receivers, with the exception of Doug Baldwin, which you can kind of understand. I mean, Baldwin's pretty good. He had a couple of great catches, even though he was covered. I mean, he was able to beat Xavier Rhodes, so that'll happen. But I thought in general, the pass defense was one of the more promising aspects of the game.
I think so. Generally, Casey Williams also had just a shockingly good game. Some of it on special teams, so whatever. But one of the highlight catches that Casey Williams had was just a highlight catch. Rhodes played it super well, not a huge problem. Another one was over Marcus Sherrill's in the end zone, which is pretty memorable. It was a really good catch, and Sherrill's kind of did screw it up. But Sherrill's just had a good game, like even if you include that. So that doesn't bother me too much. The biggest issue I have is that Mackenzie Alexander consistently had problems in the game. So yeah, I would argue that Harrison Smith, Anton Exum, who played safety and also actually quite a bit in the slot, Xavier Rhodes, I think all of them played really well. The issue, of course, I think, is that Mackenzie Alexander, it's difficult to rely on him going forward, if only because, hey, we saw some 50-odd snaps last year in the regular season where he didn't play well. He seemed pretty quiet throughout camp. Not something that bothered me, but certainly he didn't stand out in camp. And then in this game, he got pretty exploited, mostly by, Doug Baldwin, but it's not as if there aren't other, Doug Baldwin quality receivers in the slot that he'll have to deal with. So, yeah, it's an issue. I don't think it's going to continue to be the issue throughout the season that it was in this game. It was just the case that they kind of picked on Mackenzie Alexander a lot, and the other parts of the defense ended up playing really, really well. Defense tends to be sort of the weakest link in the fence sort of thing, but that's not always true. And I think the strength of the defensive line, likely improvement from Mackenzie Alexander himself, and the way that you might be able to roll coverages. I think that in the season, a lot of that can be, I'm not going to say eliminated, but covered up a little bit, and you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, I think Xavier Rhodes played phenomenally. I think that, we didn't see that many targets going deep. I think that's a credit to Harrison Smith. I think that Anton Exum played the slot really well. A little bit worried about what Terrence Newman did before he got injured. But shockingly, Marcus Sherrills, who was asked to replace him, he played really well. So, I think that you can probably say that the secondary has definitely has more good players than bad, and has really good, marks on the game, aside from, a big black mark on Mackenzie Alexander. And then when you throw in the capabilities that the defensive line has, the coverage capabilities that the linebacker showed in this game, I think you've got a pretty good pass defense. I think that the defensive line, they played kind of out of their minds. Everyone's talking about Daniel Hunter's game, and they should. He had two really big highlight pressures that almost turned into sacks, plus the sack that should be highlighted. I mean, he just had a great game. If he had played, a whole game, you end with 2 sacks and 4 other pressures. That's really, really good. But, it's also notable that Linval Joseph, for example, got a couple of pressures, got into the backfield a little bit. Tom Johnson, he had his struggles against the run. I wouldn't be surprised if he's not starting, but if he's a heavy rotational guy, a nickel, because on passing downs, he actually did get, some good pressure. I mean, he was able to shed a block instantly, get a quarterback hit on Russell Wilson, force that pass to come out super quick, and Russell Wilson couldn't take a chance. The Seahawks ended up settling for a field goal on that drive because of what Tom Johnson did on 1st and 10. And so there were some highlight moments from him too, and I think Everson Griffin played pretty well. I would have liked him to have a little bit more free reign. It certainly seemed like he was going to sort of sit and wait in case there was a rollout. And I would have liked him to get more pressure on situations where that wasn't the case. But I think that overall he played pretty well. And then Daniel Hunter also, aside from his pressure, also had a really good game against the run. And I thought Eric Kendricks was just, aside from literally the first snap where he couldn't wrap up against Eddie Lacy, I thought Eric Kendricks just had a phenomenal game, which was really nice to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think the line was able to help out the secondary in terms of keeping Wilson moving and keeping the running backs from being able to get behind the line and, just generally creating favorable situations, which was nice to see because nearly every other squad seemed to go out of their way to create unfavorable situations for themselves.
Can you actually say that again?
I feel like the defensive line did a better job of creating favorable situations for themselves and the rest of the Vikings on a night when it seemed like all the other units were like purposefully getting themselves into bad spots.
Yeah, no, I think so. Especially, coming from the slot. I think that the defensive line just did a really good job of forcing difficult throws, of taking down Russell Wilson. And that happened throughout the game. You can take a look at the starting defensive line. I thought they did really well. No one's really talking about, I think, a really phenomenal game that Linval Joseph had, which, hey, he's a nose tackle. It's kind of what happens. But he had a great game. You could take a look at the second and third string defensive line units and take a look at what Brian Robinson did. He rotated a little bit with the ones too. You could take a look at what Deshaun Bauer did. He may have ended up with one of the best games out of any of the Vikings. Jaleel Johnson had just an outstanding game. 2 tackles for loss, 2 tackles at the line of scrimmage, at least one other pressure, and without giving up big plays down his lane, which he had a great game. The throughout all 3 units we saw really astounding defensive line play that could cover for some of the weaknesses that you saw in potentially the secondary or among the linebackers. Certainly, I think the issue that the Vikings are developing at the weak side linebacker position, where no matter who they pick, there's probably going to be some sort of significant weakness. Ben Gideon, for example, keeps on getting exploited in coverage. I like to see more hit power from someone like Emmanuel Lemur. Edmund Robinson keeps on making these small mental errors. Those are all, weaknesses that could be exploited pretty easily. Despite that, I think that because of the way the defensive line is playing, because of the way that, certain members of the secondary, like Xavier Rhodes and Harrison Smith, are playing, that we're finding people making up for potential deficiencies elsewhere.
So looking at the run game, it's getting harder and harder to disagree that Dalvin Cook might have been a steal. Well, that's maybe not the best way to say it. I think it's pretty clear that Dalvin Cook is going to be good as long as he can avoid injury.
It was a very Minnesotan way to, it's the second time we've hit a very Minnesotan style of speaking, right? The double negative to mean a positive.
Just have to circle around the thing I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. I'm just going to explicitly say it. Dalvin Cook is good.
Yeah, Dalvin Cook good. Over the past 2 games, he's averaged 4.7 yards a carry, which is particularly impressive given that he averaged something like 2 yards a carry in the first game. It doesn't really matter because I think that regardless of what his numbers were in the first 2 games, he played well as a runner in the first 2 games. I think maybe not equally well, but very well. I think in the first game and even better in the second game. And then, of course, as a pass catcher, he played even better than that. He had 2, I think, pretty significant mistakes over the course of those 2 games, 1 each. I think they were both decision-making mistakes where he didn't take, a bigger crease that had opened up for him. But it's not as if he had lost significant yards. His, especially in the second game, his decision to power through contact ended up, resulting in run success. I think that some of his worst runs were 3 or 4 yards. That's not bad. And then he did get, I think, 3 runs of at least 8 or 10 yards. And those are really good plays to work off of. Some of that, I think, has to do with the way the Seattle set up. Kind of like, at Adrian Peterson's 2012 season, we saw him break off all these big runs because teams were not just stacking the box, they were stacking the line of scrimmage, which meant that once a crease had opened up, it's very easy to get additional yards beyond the line of scrimmage. And I think that kind of happened here with the Seahawks, where they didn't have that many people at the second level. Dalvin Cook was able to get into the second level and almost hit the third. So some of that has to do with the way the Seahawks were set up, but a lot of that has to do with how well Pat Elflein was blocking as a run player, how well Nick Easton was blocking. I thought that Mike Remmers is kind of, I'm not going to say an unsung hero of the running game, but kind of had his role diminished more than it should have been in post-practice reactions. I think that he did really well as a run blocker. We even saw, like I said earlier, Joe Berger playing well. So Dalvin Cook finally had a little bit more to work with. We saw what happens when he has that much more to work with. Someone had mentioned that he's a perpetual motion machine on Twitter. I really wish I could remember who it was, but that's a really good description of his running style. He always seems to be moving, but not in like the frenetic way that there's this gif going around of Joe Mixon just dancing behind the line of scrimmage and ending up getting 4 yards. That's both impressive and worrisome. It's kind of the opposite. He's very shifty, balanced, always kind of moving forward and always moving. And that's a unique style of running to see, and it's kind of cool. And whether it's because of his style or because of something else, he also generates a lot of power. He had a lot of yards after contact at Florida State. He was one of the leading running backs in Pro Football Focus's measure in that category. But a lot of people legitimately had questions about whether or not that would translate to the next level, given what I think he was like 209 pounds. I'm not sure. But so far in the preseason, he's been generating really significant yards after getting met at the line of scrimmage. So there's a lot of good to be had with Dalvin Cook. He's reading his pass blocking assignments a little bit better. He had some troubles in the first game, and he's as a pass catcher, he's doing really phenomenally.
So I thought looking further down the field, I thought the receivers had a pretty decent game. Diggs, Jarius Wright actually had a couple of cool receptions, and Floyd had some pretty good targets too. But I was really, as the game went on, I was increasingly unimpressed with the quality of the throws they were expected to catch. That's pretty fair. And I think that gives us a little bit more context to how good Jarius Wright's game was. And I'll get to that in a second. But, initially, you take a look at Stephon Diggs. He had, I think, a really good game. Again, I don't want to hype up the big catch that he got that was a result of blown coverage. I don't think he had that big of a role to play into the fact that the coverage was blown. Oh, like on the first drive?
Yeah. And so I don't want to overvalue that, but I think that throughout the rest of the game, I thought he played really well, found ways to get open against a really tough secondary. Adam Thielen, I think, was a little silent. Obviously, he didn't get that many targets, but I think that if you just watched Adam Thielen throughout the game, you'd come away a little bit impressed with the way that he got open, regardless of whether or not he was targeted. So he deserves a little bit of credit for that. Michael Floyd, I thought, played really well. It would have been even better if he had reeled in that really difficult throw in one-on-one coverage against, I think, Quentin. I forget his name. Quentin Epperson, maybe. But it would have been nice if he had reeled that in. But I think Shaquille Griffin. That's it. I think otherwise he had a pretty decent. He did a really good job run blocking when he was asked to as well. But then Jarius Wright. He played. I'm not going to say outstanding, but he played as a super reliable receiver. And I think we're kind of at this point where Jarius Wright's college career and Jarius Wright's NFL career up to this point are kind of merging finally, because he played as a very different player in college. He was an outside possession receiver for an Arkansas team that had 2 really good feature receivers in Greg Childs and Joe Adams. And with the Vikings, he's playing as kind of a straight line deep threat slot guy. Who was kind of stiff in his movements when he was in the slot. And now he's kind of a little bit of both, where he's got, that kind of speed. He is playing in the slot pretty well, but he's acting as this possession weapon who's kind of reliably moving the chains. And that's really cool to see. And he did, a lot of good for both Case Keenum and Taylor Heineke. And if he's the 4th receiver, that's great. It sounds like he'll be the 5th receiver after the 4-game suspension is up. that's as good a fifth receiver as you're going to get. And maybe that's a good thing because, we haven't seen a ton from Stacey Coley in this last game or Rodney Adams in the last 2 games that would tell you that they're going to be reliable fifth receiver options. So it was nice to see that from Jerry Wright. I don't think Laquan Treadwell got any targets. The game's been a little bit for me now. But obviously he didn't make a huge impression on me. I think he played, so I'm not just discounting him for no reason, but we'll kind of see how that pans out. Yeah, I thought the receivers played really well, and Adam Thielen probably deserved more targets than he got.
Has Case Keenum completely forgot how to set his feet?
That would imply that he knew in the first place.
Excellent. I was hoping to telegraph an answer like that, but that's what years of working on the internet together will do for you. But seriously, it felt like for the whole second, third, half of the fourth quarter, our receivers had basically no opportunities at yards after catch because Keenum was 45 degrees to the field when he threw the ball. And standing on one foot, if he was on any feet at all. Sometimes he would hop in the air and try to float one. It was just dude, what are you? It was hard to watch. I felt like we really missed a lot of opportunities.
It's certainly a worse game for Keenum than the Bills game. What's interesting is you come away taking a look at the stat boxes and say, oh my God, Keenum had another great game and Taylor Heinicke had another terrible game. This is really not the case. Keenum should have had an interception. It was dropped. Heinicke should not have had an interception. That was a result of a ball hitting Isaac Fricke's hands and then just popping up in the air and being intercepted. But, I guess these things happen. Keenum didn't play up to, I think, I'm not going to say the heights of his career in the Bills game, but didn't play up to kind of the promise that he may have shown in that Bills game. And like you said, made life really difficult for a lot of receivers. And as a result, made it really difficult to generate significant yards after the catch. I thought Heinicke had a better game. And I think that most people initially had that reaction. But as time has gone on, especially after signing Mitch Leidner, people are like, yeah, Heinicke really didn't have a good game. I don't think that's quite true. I'm not going to say he had a great game. I don't think that's quite true. I think he had a better game than Keenum. But injury and an interception on a stat sheet that's not his fault. Kind of colors our perception after the fact a little bit. But yeah, Keenum was not reliable. And honestly, even after taking a look at what I view as a pretty terrible training camp and, only one kind of good preseason game, if you asked me, hey, Sam Bradford's down, Teddy's not back yet, Keenum has to carry the team for the second half, you're up by 3 points. Do you think the team can win? I'll be like, yeah, sure. I'm not that concerned about Keenum, but he has played pretty terribly.
Yeah, I mean, maybe my perception is colored, but I just watched the condensed version of the game, and it looked as though he was taking a tumbling class and occasionally attempting to throw the football during that class. So
why do you hate fun?
I like fun, but tumble on your own time, bud.
He's just having some fun out there, man. He's like Brett Favre.
He looked like a kid. He looked like a little kid out there, just having some fun. and not setting his stupid feet.
Just like a kid.
Oh, boy. Are there any other things that we should take away from this game?
Well, the defensive line question certainly is going to be interesting. There are a number of players that deserve to make the roster from a pure talent perspective. A lot of people don't like Datone Jones. They think he's been invisible. I think what really has been happening is that Datone Jones has been making good plays on plays that someone else has already been making a good play, and so he's kind of getting hidden. He's gotten a couple of pressures, and Tashawn Bauer and Ifeadi Odenigbo grabbed sacks on those, and so no one really looked at the fact that Datone Jones shed the guard pretty quickly and got into the backfield because the quarterback was already down, not his fault. But yeah, I think that, and this gets to a question that'll be in the mailbag, but I think that you're in a really difficult spot where hey, Jaleel Johnson, the third string defensive tackle, he maybe deserves to start, right? And then you've got, all of these other players. Will Sutton has flashed. Datone Jones, like I mentioned, is worth looking at. Shamar Stephen, who has had a pretty quiet preseason, but had a dominant camp at nose tackle, I think deserves to make the roster too. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's tough. That's like my next takeaway is that, oh, wow, this defensive line is good, which was my first takeaway. But it's also my last one because like it's good everywhere. Holy crap.
Yeah, it's good and it's deep. You know what?
Yeah, I was just asked about it on this radio show, which will air in Canada, I guess. So we've got some Canadian listeners. If you listen to TSN at some point in the very near future and or the past, depending on when you're listening to this, I will have talked a little bit about the defensive line. And I said on that show, and I'm going to say it here, that I think it's probably the best defensive line in the league. And it's certainly up there in competition. Obviously, you've got the Houston Texans. You've got, maybe the Philadelphia Eagles, depending on whether or not Brandon Graham can finish his pressures and turn them into sacks. They've got Fletcher Cox there and some pretty interesting options at nose tackle. There's, and obviously the Seattle Seahawks, who we just played. There's a debate, I think, about who has the best defensive line, but I think there's maybe no debate about who has the best two deep. You could say if you include edge rushers like Von Miller, maybe you could include the Denver Broncos in a conversation about the two deep. You can include the Seahawks. They've got Frank Clark, and if Malik McDowell can return from NFI quickly enough, they've got some weight in the conversation. But I think there's not much question that the Vikings are maybe the front runners in having the best two deep at defensive line, which that's cool.
It's fine with me.
Yeah.
So this week we play the 49ers, which, all right, what can you really say? Like, they're hot garbage. This should be
playing in a baking hot stadium. So,
well, actually, they will be air conditioned garbage for this game because they're in Minnesota.
Yeah, in this game they'll be the fetidness will be tamped down. That's true.
I would say their fetidity is on par with a tire fire and not just a garbage fire.
There you go.
So
there's going to be some interesting takeaways, I think, from this game, but it is difficult to measure your roster against a roster where most players may not make the team that they're competing against.
So Brian Hoyer will probably see some action. I don't even know who his backups are.
Well, there's Iowa product CJ Beathard, who's actually been having a pretty good preseason. But I'm going to stand by my take that was a hilariously bad pick in the draft. What's interesting is that a lot of people come away with this impression that the San Francisco 49ers had this really good draft. But if you list all the players that they drafted and where they drafted them, you'll be like, what were they doing? The reason people think that is because they really boned the Chicago Bears into trade and then screwed themselves by not selecting that many good players. CJ Beathard is one of them. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, his current preseason showing, which has been pretty strong, is meaningful in some way, and maybe that pick was worth it. But for the most part, whatever. Besides that, they've got the ever so good Matt Barkley, who was so great for Chicago last year that they did not re-sign him and they got Mike Glennon instead, and he was forced to be a backup for the 49ers.
Oh man. So Brian Hoyer is the garbage can, and his backups are the two garbage cans that they reserve for puke, like the ones that they actually
right,
put liners
exactly.
in. Yeah.
Oh, that's the one we have to pull out of the closet so that the other garbage can doesn't take up the place. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll isolate some of the players that I think are really exciting to watch for the 49ers. That are really worth, the players testing their mettle against. The first is left tackle Joe Staley, who's not as good as he once was. He was once a Pro Bowl or an all-pro quality player that could have had a conversation for maybe making the Hall of Fame if the Hall of Fame was a little bit more generous to offensive linemen than they are to, say, wide receivers or quarterbacks.
Well, let me stop you right there.
He was,
and just briefly mention that Carlos Hyde, San Francisco's running back, has had probably a bottom 3 preseason so far. Admittedly, they played the Broncos in preseason week 2, but he earned a PFF grade of 38.6. in that game.
Good Lord, that's TJ Clemmings territory.
Yeah, 91st out of 92 qualifying running backs for the week. Week
That's
one,
precisely TJ Clemmings territory.
week one, overall PFF grade of 52.9. And this is potentially going to be an unpleasant story for the 49ers over the course of the year, because if they can't generate a run offense, like what kind of offense are they going to have exactly? And the one bright spot is that their offensive line is somewhat improved, maybe even significantly improved over last season. My suspicion is that Joe Staley is not the only offensive lineman on your list of matchups to watch.
Right. So the person right next to him, left guard Zane Beadles, he's going to be interesting to watch too, because he's a really good player. So Joe Staley, he's no longer the All-Pro left tackle that he was, but he's quite good. And if Everson Griffin can get past him, I think that's maybe another indication that Everson Griffin could be in line for another Pro Bowl season. Zane Beadles, I think, quite good. If we see significant movement from whoever they're going to play at under tackle in this game against him, that's also going to be pretty positive. I'm not really that sure about Kilgore at center. Great name for an offensive lineman. Got to give him that. But I have no indication that he will be bad. Brandon Fusco, former Viking. I'm not confident in him. That might be the weak spot. He has played decently, I think, in the preseason. But if I were to identify a weak spot, it'd be either him or I think Trenton Brown is the right tackle. And he is a sophomore, I want to say. I might be confusing him with this North Carolina prospect that from 2 years ago that was huge. But I'm kind of curious about what he's going to do too. I don't have a ton of information on him. I didn't pay that much attention to him when I was doing just a super quick watch on the San Francisco 49ers. But those three are going to be quite the test, I think, for a number of the Vikings, and especially because Hunter and Griffin have been rotating right and left defensive end. We're probably going to see some snaps with Hunter against Joe Staley as well, so that'll be pretty cool. Those are some matchups to watch. George Kittle, the tight end, who I don't think is starting for them. He probably should be. He's been quite good in the preseason. A lot of people know of him as a blocking tight end at Iowa. A lot of Iowa fans are pretty familiar with him. He's quite good. But he has shown a lot of receiving capability both at Iowa and in the preseason. I'm not a huge fan of Vance McDonald, who I think is officially listed as the starter, but I think we're going to see some snaps with George Kittle. So that'll be worth watching as well. I think one of the receivers, Trent Taylor, he's been having a pretty good season. What's really interesting about Trent Taylor is that they might have drafted him without knowing that he'd be a really good fit, because despite having I think 29-inch arms, like the shortest arms of any receivers in the draft, and a really poor vertical, and not an amazing 40 time or anything like that, his entire career at Louisiana Tech and in high school was catching these errant passes that would be nowhere near him. He would make all of these highlight circus catches just well outside of his catch radius and just haul them in. And that is a perfect fit for who the 49ers have at quarterback. And so it'll be interesting to see him. He needs to be covered with a tighter window than I think a lot of tiny receivers normally do. And so that might be an interesting matchup, especially because he's been lining up in the slot. The Vikings have had some issues trying to determine whether or not Mackenzie Alexander can play in the slot and so forth. So that's, I think worth watching. Besides that, I'm not that interested in Jeremy Curley, who is the nominal starter at slot receiver. Pierre Garçon probably has another decent year ahead of him, but I think Trey Waynes is going to be healthy to play this game. If Trey Waynes can't shut him down, and/or more likely Xavier Rhodes can't shut him down, that seems like it's more likely a fluke than it is an indication. I guess Garçon did really well in the last Vikings game. He had over 100 yards the last time the Vikings played him, so maybe I shouldn't be as dismissive. But, that's a matchup maybe worth watching as well. That, I think, is kind of it on offense. Matt Breida has been having a really good preseason as a running back, but I kind of don't care. He's like the fourth stringer. And if the linebackers that the Vikings have can't shut him down, I wasn't really that enthused about, whether or not Eric Wilson was going to start for the Vikings anyway. So it's probably not a huge deal.
Really? You're not like, your opinion of him didn't change after his valiant attempt to return a fumble, some amount of yardage before releasing it to the sideline? Be free.
If I love you, I have to let you go.
well, we did not lose possession. I don't know if that counts as it coming back. Okay, so pop quiz for you.
All right.
Of the projected starters for the 49ers, Joe Staley, Zane Beatles, Daniel Kilgore, Brandon Fusco, and Trenton Brown, one of them does not have a pass blocking efficiency projected for 2017. Or excuse me, one of them does not have a 100% pass blocking efficiency for the 2017 preseason. Can you guess which one person it is?
It has to be Fusco, right?
You are correct.
All right.
How did you know?
How could you possibly have guessed that?
Who could have guessed? But of course, it's only 2 games, and Fusco's rating is still a healthy 90.6. But this could be a canary in the coal mine for how the 49ers pass blocking season is going to go. I'm just saying, it looks true to trend.
Hey, if they've got like an Oakland Raiders season in them where they put together just this stunningly good offensive line pass protection, maybe Brian Hoyer could look like half a decent starter again. Who knows?
Well, we'll see about that.
Hey, he's got the same career stats as Sam Bradford, man. Let's not ding Brian Hoyer too much.
wait, what? All right. Well, moving on. You mentioned that Hunter and Griffin have been, kind of switching it up, playing both sides of the ball, and potentially will in San Francisco due to matchup issues. I feel like other parts of the game are going to be a little bit like more academic. Like there'll be a little more room for the Vikings to play around with kind of trying to resolve their last few spots on the roster and their last few starting spots. And my question to you is, does just like beating up on a tomato can of a team like San Francisco solve any of these roster questions? And if it might, do you think we'll see the offensive line lining up with players in different positions and also different players in those positions throughout the game?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think especially for the offense. I know that you just mentioned some defensive players. I don't know that there's going to be that much movement along the defense as a result of, like you said, beating up on a tomato can of an offense. But defensively, there's some players for the 49ers that are certainly, worth potentially seeing if, they can cause some trouble. So, for example, and I think that they're kind of playing in the wrong scheme for them, and people talked about it at the beginning of the season, and I think it's kind of showing up. Both Eric Armstead and DeForest Buckner were really good 5-technique defensive tackles. Right now, I think one of them is a defensive end, and the other one is an under tackle, and that's not a great fit for both of them. But I think they could still potentially cause fits for the center battle. So I think this will help resolve, whether or not it should be Nick Easton or Pat Elflein. So that's maybe worth watching. The backup quarterback thing, if Taylor Heineke is healthy enough to play, they've got some intriguing prospects at safety. I would say, for example, I really like Lorenzo Jerome, who I think he was undrafted, and I was kind of hoping that the Vikings would draft him. He was really good. I think in Division II, he kind of like led all of Division II in interceptions for, I think, 2 straight years or 3 straight years. He was certainly in All-American in Division II for 3 straight years. So he's kind of an intriguing prospect, and safeties are very often, especially if they play deep like Jerome did in college. Safeties are very often a quarterback's responsibility, and so whether or not Heineke or Keenum or I guess Leidner, take care of that issue, that's going to matter. If Sam Bradford decides to be more aggressive, I think that we've seen a little bit of Lorenzo Jerome starting again. I haven't watched a ton of 49ers. I do know that their nominal starter, Jimmy Ward, is on the PUP list, and Eric Reed, the other starter at safety, has been playing really phenomenally. and that'll be important for Sam Bradford. But how that plays out will, I think, help us get a better understanding of whether or not Sam Bradford will consistently be aggressive when he needs to be. And that doesn't resolve a roster battle, like you said, but I think it'll answer some questions for us, despite the fact that, I'm not very familiar with the linebacking core, especially when you get past the depth and their re-signing of Shane Skov. But yeah, the backup defensive line is not that impressive to me. They have one of the many Chris Joneses that exist in the NFL, but I don't think it's the good one that plays defensive tackle, the one that used to play for Bowling Green and the Patriots. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think it is. And Aaron Lynch is an edge rusher that, might be able to test, those backup tackles and see if, one of them is kind of worth their salt.
All right. You know what? Let's go straight into the mailbag, because any other questions that I would have about the 49ers game are really questions about personnel. And our listeners took time out of their day to ask those questions. So I may as well at least give them credit.
All right.
Kyle Slaby on Twitter writes in, does Dayton Jones seem to have a roster spot at this point?
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned this earlier. I think he does. I can understand why he wouldn't, because there's so much pressure elsewhere on the roster to roster more players and add depth, whereas the defensive line just has so many good players that you could see someone like Dayton Jones kind of fall by the wayside. So I can see why he wouldn't. I just kind of disagree with the general understanding that he's been having a poor preseason. I think he's having a pretty good one. It's not as explosive as Julio Johnson's. They're not going to cut Tom Johnson. So Dayton Jones looks like the outside looking in, but there's a really good chance that they keep, 9 defensive linemen. So that would be Hunter, Griffin, Joseph, both Johnsons. That's 5. And then Bauer, Weatherly, Robinson. That's 8. And then the 9th would either be, Shamar Stephen, who, fair enough, maybe he deserves it, or Dayton Jones. And maybe they don't keep Bauer. That seems unlikely to me. I initially thought that at the beginning of the preseason that they wouldn't, and they'd have to find a way to get him onto the practice squad. Sounds like they're going to have to roster him. And maybe that means Weatherly doesn't make it, because 5 defensive ends and 5 defensive tackles seems like a lot. But yeah, I can see that Dayton Jones being on the outside looking in, but I think that he's been playing well.
Justin King writes in, O-line looked okay with Boone out. Is there any steam to having Easton get a shot at starting left guard?
I think there's a steam at him getting a shot at starting right guard. I think they're just going to play Boone.
Adam Endicott writes in, Bucky Hodges see any regular season snaps if Rudolph stays injury-free?
Yeah, I think so. There's going to be opportunities when you're, in second and 6, and you don't want to bring your blocking tight end out there, David Morgan, because there's a nice linebacker matchup you want to exploit. So both Kyle Rudolph and Bucky Hodges could see the field at the same time, because he just plays a different role than David Morgan. So he's nominally tight end 3, but in a lot of situations he's tight end 2, and sometimes you have both of those tight ends out there. He's getting a lot better at blocking. I think that people just kind of assume that he's playing to a scouting report, which a lot of these young players so far have been playing to their scouting reports. It's not as if, it's super lazy. It's kind of smart to assume that players are who they are. But he's been playing a lot better as a blocker than I had expected. That's not to say, he's an above average blocker for a tight end, but he is adequate, a little below average as a blocker. And that's enough, I think, to kind of throw him out there on a couple of downs and see what he does. So yeah, I think he'll get snaps, even if Rudolph stays healthy the entire time. And, it's not like Rudolph is going to play 1,000 snaps. They're going to have tight ends out there. And sometimes Rudolph is going to rest. He's going to maybe play 800 or 600 snaps, more likely 800. And in those situations, it's going to be Bucky Hodges and David Morgan, or just Bucky Hodges. So for sure.
John Campos, I believe, judging by his Twitter handle. How were we able to contain Fat Eddie Lacy the other night when he normally eats us up for breakfast?
Hey, I guess he wasn't fat enough, right? He made weight for the Seahawks, earned pretty thick signing bonus. I didn't want to say the word fat again, but pretty good workout bonus. That was it. And maybe the weakness that the Vikings have had is just how big he is. He did break a tackle immediately on his first run, and got some decent yardage. But after that, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he just didn't play that many snaps. I mean, like we said in the last, the preview episode for the game, the Seahawks have like 9 or 10 running options, and that barely includes Russell Wilson. Like, you've got 8 running backs, 2 running fullbacks in Trey Madden and Marcel Reese, and then you've got the running options that you have at quarterback. Because I think their backup is Trevone Boykin, who a lot of people during the run to the draft would jokingly call him Trevick Boykin because of how exciting of a runner he was. So yeah, you didn't need to play Eddie Lacy that much, so you didn't see that much damage that Eddie Lacy caused. So I think that it's a combination of maybe the Vikings are kind of used to him playing at a bigger weight, and also that there's so many runners that he just didn't have an opportunity to do that much damage. Oh, also the Seattle offensive line is maybe hot garbage.
Now that he's lean, he has also become mean.
Well, wouldn't it be the opposite? He's less mean now.
No, he's lean and mean. At any rate, next question comes from our guest on the most infamous Norse code taping of all time, Giants fan and fantasy enthusiast Dennis Esser, at Coach Esser on Twitter. Adam Thielen seems to be criminally low in ADP in fantasy leagues this year. How close will his production be to Diggs?
I think there's a real risk that they'll have pretty close production, which would in this case mean that Diggs is being overdrafted, and of course conversely that Thielen is being underdrafted. But I do think that it is more likely that Diggs ends up getting 1,400 odd yards, maybe 1,300 odd yards, and maybe I should hedge my bets, 1,300 yards. And that Adam Thielen will approach 1,000. That's pretty good, given that he's not being drafted that highly. He also, I think, has the potential to be more of a touchdown threat than Diggs is. Shermer has been using Diggs as more of an underneath guy. In this preseason so far, that's not quite been the case. But, that's something I'm a little bit worried about. But Thielen has always been a guy that has had the ability to get open downfield. And maybe in a fashion that's a little bit more reliable than Diggs getting open downfield, who's also, caught, his fair share of deep passes. I think because of, Thielen's speed and his ability to separate at all 3 levels, there's a good chance he could be a better touchdown threat. He's, a bigger player than Stephon Diggs, so he may be able to, win some fades or some other interesting options in at the goal line. And so, yeah, I think that while I don't think that Thielen's production is going to match that of Diggs, I think that there's a good chance that it's going to be close enough that maybe Diggs is being overdrafted, Thielen's being underdrafted.
Sam Ward writes in, do you think the Vikings would agree to be on Hard Knocks? Is it an agree situation, or do they just say you're going to be on Hard Knocks?
Well, I think initially... So I think the process is any team that wants to be on Hard Knocks probably will end up being on Hard Knocks. But I think Hard Knocks puts together a list of teams that they'd want to see. They ask those teams, and then those teams will either agree or deny. And then if all of those teams have denied, then the NFL goes through a process where they force a team to do it. And those processes exclude playoff teams, which I think is kind of horseshit. And also excludes teams with new coaches. And I think there's another criteria. But usually they go, and then they pick one of the teams that, after meeting those criteria, I think the Hard Knocks people select. So there is an opportunity for the Vikings to agree at a couple of stages. But I think that they probably won't, like most teams. I don't think it'll have an appreciable effect. There's been talk of a Hard Knocks curse, especially with what happened with the Jets. But I don't think it's they're going to be that big of an impact one way or the other. So I think teams kind of over-perceive the impact of a distraction or the impact of like people being so involved in their football operation. But yeah, it just really doesn't seem like something the Vikings would do.
So if they did, what would be the positives and negatives to such an adventure?
Well, I think the positives are mostly to the bottom line of the NFL and to the Vikings for generating some hype, ticket revenue, and merchandise opportunities. For example, when it was following the Texans, I would have been okay buying some socks from Happy Socks. What was his name? Charles James, I think. The second. I would have totally bought some Happy Socks from him. That would have been fun. So there's some merchandising opportunities maybe. And some players get a spotlight that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have, and you get to expose some personalities. The fans, obviously, there's a big pro. But I think that for the team, I don't think there's a ton of pros or cons. It may make the team feel a little bit more uncomfortable, but evidently they get kind of used to that. It would be kind of interesting for fans to see what the cut-down process is like for the Vikings specifically. We would be able to see kind of what the new facility looks like from a bunch of different angles, and so on. I don't know that there's a ton of pros or cons related to the team itself. I just don't think it has as much of an impact on the team as teams typically think. But it does make people uncomfortable and exposes some otherwise fairly private moments, and people value their privacy, that kind of thing. But I don't think it has an appreciable impact on overall team performance by the time the season starts.
All right. My thing on Hard Knocks is that, one, I want to drool over the facility. I want to see just how awesome their gym facilities and shower facilities are, because I love looking up sink porn on the internet. I like a good fountain sink. I enjoy a fancy shower, a fancy hot tub. Beyond that, I feel like the NFL, for all the drama that plays out in the media, I feel like the NFL is kind of unique. Well, even more so than hockey, because, the players you see every week more or less all look the same. You can see their shoes and their uniforms and their helmets, but that's about it. And I think that has kind of like a net, depersonalizing effect on many players. There are exceptions like, OBJ, Josh Freeman, some people whose personalities they just simply cannot contain within themselves. But for me, the best thing about Hard Knocks is, seeing these guys with their helmets and their pads off, being humans and putting, voices and personalities and literally faces to the names that you see on the jerseys every week in the games.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And it could create some marketing opportunities, not just merchandising, like I mentioned, like Charles James brand Happy Socks. TM, hit me up, Charles, if you want that idea. I won't charge much.
Price is very reasonable. Intellectual property so cheap. It's there's a glut of intellectual property at the Hassan household.
Right. But, I think it opens up marketing opportunities. I think that, if, for example, wow, I already forgot his name, so maybe not that many great marketing opportunities. Riley Bulla, who, by the way, we're recording this while an episode of Hard Knocks is playing. I haven't watched it yet, but I've watched the first 2 episodes of Tampa Bay's Hard Knocks, and I think Riley Bulla is one of the players that they're focusing on, who, is a third-string linebacker, probably going to make it to the second string. And certainly seems like somebody who may be able to take advantage of some of the marketing opportunities that the visibility of Hard Knocks will give them. So, it definitely could. And then, of course, we see Jameis Winston's personality. A lot of our understanding of Jameis Winston, like it is for almost every NFL player, like you mentioned, has been defined kind of through the media. While I have my thoughts on some of the controversy surrounding Jameis Winston, it's undeniable that he has demonstrated a lot of charisma while on Hard Knocks. And that, I think, could open up more marketing opportunities for him than before because, hey, we haven't been told that many positive things about the dude.
Well, yeah, and obviously it's mostly marketing opportunities for the league and the players, but, I think it makes it more fun to be a fan when, people come at you with all this stuff. Jameis Winston is the perfect example. People come at you with all this stuff about how, he's a crab leg stealing, woman punching, justice obstructing, Faco. He's in the same mold as Russell Wilson. And when you watch Hard Knocks, you kind of get the sense that isn't true, that he's kind of his own person. And, maybe it's more fun to be like, maybe he's not the best guy, whatever else he's done. I just like watching him play. I know he's out there acting like a kid, having a good time.
He really is acting like a kid, as often as we make that joke. He is.
Yeah.
So,
but dude, he's what, like 25?
Right. 25-year-old kid.
To be, 20. I feel like maybe this is just because, you always feel like whatever part of your life has passed is like your kid life, but I didn't know shit when I was 25.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the argument against tattoos, right? As, what was it, Red versus Blue laid out so elegantly? Don't get a tattoo because think of how dumb you were 5 years ago. Think of how you'll think of yourself 5 years from now. You're going to be as dumb as shit now.
I don't know. I think I'm like 90% baked. I think if you stuck a toothpick in me, it would come out like almost clean.
You think 5 years from now you'll think that about yourself?
Well, I will say that I am being much more considered. And so I have no tattoos yet, but working in the bar and restaurant industry, I think I might be one of the last 10 people that doesn't have any tattoos. And so since I've had a lot of experience like viewing other people's and kind of being, one step away from that culture, I've been like thinking about it, and like I've got some rough drafts drawn up that I want to like bring to an artist that I like and be like, okay, let's kind of work this out. Like I'm being much more thoughtful about the process than I would have been 5 years ago, and way more thoughtful about it than I would have been 10 years ago. So I don't think that.
I mean, that's not my argument against tattoos. Most people, it seems like, do not regret getting their tattoos.
Exactly.
I'm just saying.
And the more people
argument.
Well, the more people I meet, the more anecdotal evidence I gather that is not the case. Anyway. Andrew Fraser writes in, what song would you want to play when you walk into the pod studio?
The John Cena music.
I don't think so Andrew suggests in parentheses that you walk into the pod studio in slow motion. And I think like when I come sit down to do the show, I kind of walk in with the exaggerated like Vince McMahon strut. Like with my arms flapping around as though my elbows had been shattered.
That's pretty fair. If I have to do it slow-mo, I may not pick the John Cena music. I think most people pick the Imperial March, and I understand that, but I don't want to pick that.
That's so lame. Don't do that.
Right. Flight of the Valkyries is too much. That's over the top. I don't know. If it's not John Cena's music, I haven't thought this question out enough to fully answer it. I can't pick any of my like favorite songs because like all of my favorite songs are like whiny 90s alt. And I don't want that right before I record a podcast.
You don't want that to be your walk-up music?
Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, Third Eye Blind song about suicide. Let's play that one. Not that one? No, what about the one about meth?
We can play Jumper at the end of every podcast. Like before we play a difficult team,
sign off.
We can just put it on and just be like, don't worry, I wish you'd come back. Don't. It's not that bad. It's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. For me, I have two. I think my general walk-up music so my psych-up music and my walk-up music are two different things. And I feel like walking up to a podcast studio where I'm about to like shut myself in a silent room for 2 hours isn't really the same as what like my crowd walk-up music would be. My psych-up song would be, it's from their first album. The song is just called Intro by the XX.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's perfect.
And that is a classic like psych-up song. Like if you just need to be in like a quiet space and chill and take like 2 minutes to put your game face on, that song will do it. And
yeah, there's like 10-hour mixes on YouTube and I've just like decided to skip the middleman and download it directly off of YouTube. It's great. It's like you said, it's perfect for psyching up.
So what kills me though is that like the rest of the first XX album is nothing like that song.
I haven't even decided to check out the XX discography. That song was just good enough for me.
Well, so they have 2 albums. Skip the first one because Intro is by far the best song, and the rest of the album sounds nothing like it. Like I got the album so excited. I was like, oh, cool, another band. And I was like, what the hell is this crap? It's like when Cookie Monster opens the bag and it's all vegetables. Like, however, their second album is awesome.
You think they learned the lesson from the fact that Intro was by far the best song on the first album?
Well, I think what happened was they realized that they wanted to play like live shows that were fun and where people were dancing, and so they had to make music that was less sleepy.
Oh yeah, that's fair.
And so now it's got like a decent beat to it, and there's more lyrics. They're less whiny and more like appropriately like love songy. Like I don't know, they figured out what was wrong with their first album and they fixed a lot of the issues while still like I don't know it as sophomore albums go, it's really great.
Well, okay. In that vein, here's 2 stereotypical songs that I could pick. There's Aloe Black's "I'm the Man." Right? Which
hard no.
I'm just saying it's one of the stereotypical songs that you could...
If I had a buzzer, I'd be pressing it right now.
Oh my god.
If I had a gong,
what
I'd be throwing
about
a mallet
I Need a Dollar song by Aloe Black? That one's great.
That is much better. Need about Tree Fitty.
And then what's the... This is definitely buzzer-worthy, especially from you. But what's the... I don't even know how to pronounce this band's name. Avicii? 2 eyes at the end?
Yep.
What's the song that got the... Well, they've got one pretty famous song and a bunch of pseudo-famous songs.
Oh, that song? The one that uses the same loop from the Etta James song?
Wake Me Up. That's the song.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, that's... it's cheesy, but, like... I'm the Man is, like, one of the worst songs in musical history.
That's incorrect. I think you're just saying that because it was overplayed.
Ooh, it's like if Cream of Wheat was a song. It's just like warm mush.
Wait, a warm mush? What about Happy? Which is a guilty pleasure of mine, by Pharrell.
Cream of Wheat with like cinnamon sugar on it. Wait, whoa. You like that song?
I said it was a guilty pleasure. I shouldn't like the song.
All right.
I fully admit that.
All right. That's fine. So to get us marginally back on track, I
think I have to go with your suggestion though. That's great. Especially for a podcast studio.
Oh yeah. Well, if you're ever going into like a single, like that would be a perfect like debate round psych up song, like to just put in your headphones.
Oh
and listen to right before you walk in the room.
Used it for that. I think the song's old enough for me to have done that.
So my crowd walk up song, like if I was doing like a live event and I had to like walk to a stage and there was the potential that people would cheer, I would pick the Atmosphere song YGM, which is from their bootleg album Strictly Leakage, which they released for free on their website right around Christmas 2004.
Does that mean we can cut that in? Because we always got to be worried about it.
So it's funny. I've actually, well, James more than me, but James and I have been working to try and get like replay rights to that song so we can use it as the Norse code theme going forward because it's just so badass. It's just like strutting into a room with just like gold chains and like, you know, making it rain. Just like it just, you can't hear that song and not feel like a baller. And it's just a great track. I mean, Strictly Leakage is my favorite Atmosphere album, apropos of nothing. And the first track just starts out so awesome. Like, I've wanted to use it on the show for years, and we've been trying to reach out to various sources at Rhymesayers to get the rights to play it. So if anyone out there can help with that, that'd be sweet. NorseCodePodcast@gmail.com is our contact spot. But that would also be my, like, personal walk-up song to any event where there was a potential that I might be able to get some people to cheer for me if I did like the raise the roof thing a little bit. like walked around and like clapped real hard like that. I could gin up a crowd.
Well, my crowd walk-up music might still be the John Cena music.
Nope, you're stuck with Happy now.
What?
Yeah, that's what you get.
Oh, for what? For enjoying a song?
It'll appeal to certain demographics.
Yeah, I don't want those demographics.
But children are our future.
You just walk around with like stuffed Minion dolls. Jesus.
You could just bring a bag of them with you to the event and just like throw them into the crowd.
That would be perfect with that lame walk-up entry. No, I'm picking the John Cena music. Screw you.
Oh boy. Chase writes in mac and cheese pizza. Your thoughts?
Yes. It's more delicious starch with cheese already. Like, yeah.
Hard no.
What? You ever been to Mesa?
Contention 1. All these foods are trying to be 2 things. Why can't food just be one thing? Why can't mac and cheese be mac and cheese and pizza be pizza? Why can't Korean barbecue and tacos exist separately? Why do I have to have Korean tacos? They don't have tacos in Korea.
Holy crap, you're totally missing the point. It's only whether or not they taste good together, and they do. That's the only thing that matters.
Contention 2.
Oh, Jesus.
Mac and cheese pizza is just a cheese quesadilla with different mechanical processing.
Do you not like cheese quesadillas?
When they're cheese quesadillas, yes.
What? Okay, so if something is a cheese quesadilla, but with different trappings, what makes a cheese quesadilla good about that is unique to its cheese quesadilla-ness? If it's just a cheese quesadilla, that's good. Eat it.
So you've got your less processed starch underneath the pizza, your crust, with a crazily processed starch, the macaroni on top.
Correct.
Name me one other situation where it would ever be acceptable to spread pasta onto bread or a crust.
Well, I can't think of one. That doesn't make it wrong.
Well, you keep thinking about it.
Hold on. Il timpano, the dish that they served in Big Night.
Okay,
So
but I would argue that is a more acceptable interpretation just because there's so much other stuff involved. Like it's not just like crust and pasta and some cheese.
You're just moving the goalposts, man.
Well,
if you put a delicious thing on a delicious thing and it tastes more delicious than before, which I will contend that mac and cheese pizza tastes better than a cheese pizza, in most, probably depending on your mood, but in most situations, then it's good. Also, I will submit mashed potato pizza, friggin' delicious.
Ooh, boy.
You preempted one of my answers to another question that we had in the mailbag, which the answer was actually Korean barbecue tacos. Why do you hate good things just because they're 2 separate things?
I don't hate them. I enjoy Korean barbecue and tacos. I just don't understand why we have to have this obsession with like food being more than one thing. Why can't things just be what they are?
Food doesn't have if things are just the thing that they are, then you have no fusion. Then you don't have different types of sushi.
No, you can totally have fusion. You can. So in cocktail making they call this Mr. Potato Heading, where you take like a classic cocktail recipe or a classic proportion and then substitute one ingredient for another that's from like a similar like provenance. And that's, fine. That's where I think a lot of like successful fusion comes from is, food made with ingredients that may not be regionally typical or maybe prepared in an unconventional way. But like, I'm trying to think of another example beyond Korean tacos.
Literally almost all of our cultural mainstays is food? Those? Yeah.
So, well, my mind immediately goes to the Ultimate Food Saturday Night Live sketch, where where the signature food item at the restaurant just keeps getting more and more ridiculous. They're like, and
Oh,
then
I was thinking of an actual YouTube channel.
Epic Mealtime.
That's it. That bothers the hell out of me.
Well,
that doesn't make food better.
That's the natural conclusion of all this ridiculousness is fast food lasagna.
No, but it's not, though. It just, at every step of the process, does this taste better than before? If not, stop. Epic Mealtime has made friggin' like one good thing. And that's okay.
So let me tell you what I want. I want a pizza with like somewhat regular pizza toppings with like really delicious macaroni and cheese instead of pizza cheese.
Hold on. The original pizza was just cheese pizza.
Yep.
And so you had to add all of these trappings that were originally another thing.
Fine. So give me cheese pizza.
That's it.
With macaroni.
You're never going to have a pepperoni pizza. You're never going to have sausage on your pizza. You're never going to have onions on your pizza. Like, come on, man.
You're putting words in my mouth, and you don't understand how much I love cheese pizza. But just let me finish.
Okay, do you like tomatoes on tomato sauce in your pizza?
So give me cheese pizza with mac and cheese sauce as the sauce.
Okay, now let's add some starch.
Right? No, why?
Because it tastes good.
All right, so if we're going to do that, let's turn it into a stromboli or a calzone and put just like a normal pizza thing on top of it instead of macaroni.
That sounds good too.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Well, you can have my mac and cheese pizza.
Great. I'm going to enjoy delicious things because I don't care about your arbitrary categorizations that do not make sense historically. Tomatoes come from friggin' North America, man.
Yeah, and they're good with cheese.
Next question.
John Judick writes in, do Dusty and Arif know the joy that is maple cream?
Obviously. What?
Kidding me? I grew up 60 miles south of the Canadian border. Of course I know what maple cream is.
It's delicious.
It's so good.
And also no cream.
Yeah, also not cream. Yeah. It's just, it's all maple, no cream.
Yeah. It's astounding, but delicious.
And I don't know why, but I like it better in coffee than maple syrup. It doesn't really make any sense. I think it has to do with...
that makes sense to me.
I think it's just because the flavor is a little bit more developed or something. Like, I don't know. Alex Goebel writes in, is it ethically wrong to punch in for work and then immediately spend 15 minutes on the toilet knowing that you wouldn't punch out mid-shift?
I'm pro-labor, man.
I feel like you're a strange person to ask this question to, since you're never really like other than when something is recording and you're like on a microphone, you're never really on the clock. I mean, other than
I was going to defer to you on this. The last time I held a punch-in, punch-out job was in college.
Well, so I'm not a very good person to defer to either, because like usually when I get to work, I have approximately 30 minutes to do enough setup where if I were to do it at like a normal person's speed, it would take 45 minutes. Like I have to hit the ground running when I get to work. So like if I show up and spend 15 minutes on the can, then I mean that just like I'm going to get yelled at because we're not going to be able to open the doors right at 5. However,
so I maybe then the answer is dependent on how critical are those 15 minutes to the operation of the company.
Exactly. If you just have, roughly 8 hours worth of work to do, or maybe you're one of those lucky fools that has like 4 hours of work to do that's stretched out into 8 hours. If that's the case, poop whenever you want.
And for evidently as long as you want, as long as it's not 4 hours.
As long as you don't spend so much time dinking around on your phone that both your legs fall asleep.
Had that happen.
Brian Dunkel writes in, were it absolutely necessary to slum it with a cold cut sandwich, what is your favorite deli meat / sandwich configuration?
I don't think that's slumping it.
Cold cuts are tasty.
Here's something that I don't know that Dusty will like this, but What about a Reuben, but instead of sauerkraut, it's Thousand Island dressing?
Everybody knows I don't like anything.
That's true. I think that's pretty delicious.
No, I like that idea too.
Okay, cool. That's not slumming it.
So
Pastrami's great.
Yeah, you can never go well. So I'm glad you
stopped yourself.
I'm glad you pulled the trigger on pastrami because I was like torn in my head. I was like, God, I effing love pastrami so much. But it's better served hot. And I didn't want to be like, well, that's not really a cold cut. So you took one for the team on that one. I would say that the like a super classic Italian sandwich with just like some capicola and some salami,
yes,
and like some provolone cheese and maybe like a big handful of like arugula or some like peppery green thing and some oil and salt. Oh, wonderful.
Oh, that's great. I agree with that. Also, another sandwich that's better hot. Doesn't matter. Still good cold.
So possibly the only appropriate application of turkey is to a turkey, bacon, and avocado sandwich.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure that's a fine sandwich. Is that sandwich better with another meat? Very probably.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried it with chicken, and it just isn't the same. Like, I think it's one of those sandwiches that actually benefits from how little the turkey brings to the party. If that makes any sense.
That's really sad. I get what you're saying.
And it's like I said, it's the only appropriate application for turkey in my mind. But and that's a very like Colorado answer. I feel like that sandwich is very extremely popular here and in California, and basically nowhere else.
Yeah, I can believe that.
Austin writes in, what's your favorite meal to prep for the week? Or a favorite meal to meal prep for the week, now that that's a term that exists in the lexicon. Looking for food combinations that will keep for a few days.
Tacos. That's it.
Tacos, period. Taco apostrophe S, period.
So this is actually something we just started doing again for the first time in a while. But yeah, I just grabbed some tortillas. We prefer corn. A lot of people prefer flour. And that's the only thing that we heat up when we're doing a really quick lunch or something. In this case, it's very often chicken tacos because it's very easy to find, like just shredded chicken. You just put that in, some slaw if you want, like a red cabbage flavor. If not, just lettuce or cilantro. We also put in cilantro. A little bit of lemon juice and a little bit of pico, which you can buy or just make ahead of time. Delicious. But the thing that I wanted to get at was this is also a great time and I was going to say this before you brought it up, it's also a good time to get Korean short rib, because that's actually pretty good cold too. And so you can just put that directly on the taco. Oh, also we put avocados in it, but that's, we're millennials, right? So
Korean short ribs are an incredibly cheap and delicious and easy to cook, like delicious thing. If you have access to them, I don't care how much you already eat of them, you should be eating more.
I agree.
So
that's a good meal prep ahead of time thing, I think.
So I've known people that do like really serious meal prep, like they'll write out their grocery list for like the entire week and like make a week's worth of food at one time, either for refrigeration or freezing, and then they just eat whatever they made throughout the course of the week. These people usually have like 9-to-5 jobs or like professional jobs that, consume more than 40 hours of their week, and they don't really have time to cook or whatever, and they're just not restaurant people. I'm a restaurant person. I mean, I'm a bartender that like is dating a chef. So, we eat out separately or together probably 15 times a week. And consequently, meal prep and meal planning is not a big part of our lives. Having said that, the best process that I have found for doing that when I did do it, and kind of the process that we follow at home, is to, like Arif was saying, pick proteins that taste good, cold or hot. Korean short ribs are a good one. Salmon is a really good one, or other kinds of like large fish. I think taste equally good, cold or hot. Tofu, oddly enough, works great cold, or you can just sear it on all sides and get something warm and crispy. So you cook a bunch of protein on your meal prep day, and then you can either reheat it or not reheat it as you like. And then when you go to the grocery store, get a bunch of those like pre-bagged salads. There's our local grocer carries a like kale salad that has like chopped kale and carrots and red cabbage. It's some trendy superfood salad nonsense, but it's reasonably priced. The ingredients are good and the dressing is pretty tasty. So I'll get a few bags of that and a loaf of bread and maybe some like sandwich dressings, Thousand Island, mustard, mayonnaise, whatever, to go with my like cooked proteins. I might, roast off a vegetable or two, but usually I leave vegetables for the last minute. And I'll also do fresh rice whenever I cook. We have a rice cooker, obviously, because every home should. And when it's time to eat, I'll just start some rice. And when it's done, I'll eat it with whatever vegetables, protein, cold or hot. Maybe I'll have a little salad. During the day, I'll just grab some salad, toss it together, throw some of whatever cooked protein we have on hand on top of it, and eat it. Just
yeah, we've got like a couple of cups of rice in the fridge right now. It's always good to have just on hand.
Well, see, so that's the thing, is that I always make my rice fresh. I don't like refrigerated and then reheated rice. It's just the texture is...
It's perfect for frying.
Ooh, that's true. And yeah, and at the end of the day, that was going to be my last point. Thank you for the handy segue. No matter what happens, if you've got leftover rice and a bunch of leftover stuff at the end of the week, make fried rice.
Boom.
And you're done. One last question from Kyle Segal. Can creeping fig be grown from cuttings?
I can't believe that's the question you chose out of the 30 that he asked. I was not prepared for this one.
The answer is yes.
I was going to say I would guess yes, but sure. Yeah, okay, cool. Thanks, Dusty.
If you live in the part of the country, like the very southern part of the country, like Florida, Arizona, etc., where creeping fig grows outdoors all year round, because it doesn't really like cold, then you can let it grow on the side of your house, but be warned that you're going to have it forever, because once creeping fig attaches to something, you will probably have to destroy whatever it's attached to get it off.
Oh.
Or at least do some major cosmetic damage to it.
Okay. So that's your botany-ish lesson of the week.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle.
All the questions you chose.
Oh, I thought about it long and hard. I think that was the. I think I made the right choice.
That's what she said. Wait, no, I should have used that earlier. God damn it.
That's what I said to her.
All right.
You got anything?
This is a good episode.
Yeah, no, this worked out pretty well. I enjoyed that very much. My only regret is that I did not warn people when there were not going to be any more football questions.
Whoops.
Hopefully they've all figured it out and have all stopped listening by now. What do you got for us next week? I mean, beyond the next episode of the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings and the Andy Luke and Arif football machine.
As well as
potentially other radio appearances.
Yeah, so I'm going to get a 53-man roster up. I already got a piece up on what may be the potential implications of Teddy being healthy maybe a little bit earlier than the Vikings anticipate, whether or not they put him on the PUP. So that piece is already up. I'm going to get a 53-man roster. I'm going to get a center evaluation between Nick Easton and Pat Elflin up. And if I still have time after that, a thing, I'm not going to call it a preview, but a thing on the 49ers game.
A thing. Because we just did the preview.
Right. Yeah, see, exactly. That's The reason I wasn't going to call it that.
The review preview. The re-preview.
Review. No, that doesn't... Damn.
Re-preview what you never... No. That is the signal that it is time to end episode 190 of Norse Code. We shall return next week with a recap of the 49ers game and then a preview of preseason week 4, along with whatever else happens that is worth noting in Vikings land. Because, we're Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. Demand excellence. Demand Norse Code. We'll see you next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, or wherever else fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, who can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. Our intrepid producer and occasional co-host James Pagachnik can be found on Twitter at Big Mono or curating the official Norse Code Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. I'm your host with a firm grasp of the obvious, Dusty O'Connell, and my name is my handle on Twitter. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, your one-time donation can be made at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Please visit our website, norsecodepodcast.com, where you'll find links to our Facebook and YouTube pages, along with the episode archive and some other good stuff. And any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be emailed to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. And on behalf of the entire Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.